Why cavemen risked death for fire. Picture this. A freezing prehistoric night. The kind where the air bites your skin and your breath turns to ice before it leaves your lips. Darkness swallows the land. Predators lurk just beyond the glow of the moon, their eyes glinting like shards of glass in the shadows. In the center of a small clearing, a handful of trembling humans huddled together, their bodies pressed tight, shivering, not just from the cold, but from the fear that something out there is watching. And then one man rises. He clutches a sharpened stick, his heart pounding, and begins the dangerous trek toward a distant flicker in the blackness. A flicker that could save them all. That flicker is fire. But here's the question. Why would someone risk certain death venturing into predator territory just to steal a burning branch? And how did that single choice ignite the story of human survival? The hunger for heat, the cold, was not just an inconvenience, it was a predator. It stalked early humans silently, wrapping its claws around their lungs with every breath of frozen air. Nights in the Ice Age could kill as swiftly as any saber-toothed cat. Hypothermia did not roar, did not growl, it crept in quietly, stealing warmth from the core until a body stopped shivering altogether. For our ancestors, warmth wasn't a luxury. It was the fragile thread between living another day and becoming food for scavengers. Without fire, nights were longer, darker, and infinitely more dangerous. The sun's departure was indeed just the end of the day, it was the beginning of a fight against death. They knew shelter could block some wind, furs could trap some heat, but nothing compared to the magic of a flame. Fire was life condensed into light and heat. It dried soaked hides, smoked meat to last through winter, and pushed the darkness back just far enough to make predators hesitate. For those first humans, fire wasn't just survival, it was a shield, a weapon, and a miracle all in one. But here's the truth. Fire didn't belong to them at first. They didn't know how to summon it. It was an elusive gift, given only when nature decided after a lightning strike ignited a tree, or when lava spilled from the belly of the earth. If they wanted it, they had to take it before it died out, and that meant getting close to danger. Imagine watching a storm split the sky, a tree erupting into flames, smoke coils into the air, heat radiates from the crackling wood. But predators see it too. Hyenas, big cats, and even other humans might be circling. You know that without fire, your tribe may not make it through the next week, but to get it, you must run toward a place where death waits in more than one form. That hunger for heat was greater than fear. It had to be. Without that hunger, humans would have stayed huddled in caves, vulnerable, waiting for extinction. Instead, that drive to chase fire, to risk everything for, it was the first sign of the defiance that would define our species. When a hunter set out for fire, he wasn't just seeking warmth, he was carrying the future of his people in his hands. Every flicker of flame brought back was a promise. We will not die tonight. And so, the chase began, not for food, not for territory, but for the one thing that could keep the cold at bay and the shadows at a distance. Fire didn't just change the temperature, changed the night itself. Without it, darkness was absolute. An ocean of black where eyes could not see, and ears strained for every twig snap, every rustle. Our ancestors lived in a world where night was not merely the absence of daylight, it was a realm owned by predators. Before fire, humans were prey after sunset. They could not outsee an owl, they could not outrun a lion, and in the pitch-black cold, they couldn't even huddle in silence without the creeping dread of being smelled, tracked, and taken. Fire was the first tool that bent the night in our favor. The glow reached out like a warning. Here we are. Come closer, and you'll regret it. Predators feared it. Instinctively, smoke choked their senses. Sparks startled their eyes. Heat seared their paws, and in that fear, humans found their first perimeter of safety. But it wasn't only protection. Fire unlocked something our species had never truly possessed before: control over food itself. Raw meat was risky. Parasites, bacteria, and the sheer toughness of uncooked flesh meant eating was often a gamble. A flame transformed that gamble into a feast. It made meat softer, easier to chew and digest. It made plant roots edible that otherwise would have poisoned the stomach. It extended the life of food, letting tribes carry reserves through long winters or droughts. And yet every benefit of fire was bound by a single problem. You could not make it. You could only keep it alive once you had it. That meant the flame was as fragile as the people who guarded it. If it went out, the tribe was thrust back into the cold, and the hunt for fire began again. Some tribes would carry embers for days, wrapped in moss or bark, breathing life into the smolder whenever it began to fade. Others would assign a firekeeper, a role as sacred as a warrior's. This was no casual chore. If the flame died, so might the tribe. The person responsible bore the weight of dozens of lives in the fragile glow of those coals. It's easy, in the modern world, to take heat for granted. A switch, a stove, a heater, we command warmth without risk. But for the people who lived tens of thousands of years ago, fire was earned. And more often than not, it was earned through risk so high that the line between bravery and desperation was nearly invisible. Fire was a prize, and every prize demands a price. For early humans, that price was courage in the face of the elements, predators, and even rival tribes. And soon, that price would be paid in the most dangerous way imaginable, by venturing out into the darkness to steal the flame from the teeth of the world itself. The stories always began the same way, with a flicker in the distance. Sometimes it was lightning striking a tree, turning it into a torch against the horizon. Sometimes it was a patch of dry grass, ignited by the sun's relentless heat, and sometimes it was the enemy's campfire. For early humans, these moments were as much a call to arms as a hunt. When a spark appeared on the land, the decision was immediate: risk the journey, or face the cold. But this was no simple sprint across an open plain. Every step toward fire meant crossing through danger predator trails, treacherous terrain, and, if the flame came from another tribe, the very real threat of being killed on sight. Imagine a small band setting out in silence, every nerve on edge. The air smells faintly of smoke, a beacon, and a warning all at once. They move quickly, but cautiously, their eyes scanning the dark for movement, their ears catching distant growls. They pray are only the wind. The fire is close now. Its light dances between the trees. Hearts pound, breath fogs in the air. If the fire belonged to nature, a fallen tree burning after a storm, there was still danger. Animals drawn by curiosity or warmth might be circling, and every second wasted meant the flames could weaken, forcing the humans to dig deep into the embers, desperate to capture heat before it vanished. If the fire belonged to another tribe, the challenge shifted from nature to human cunning. The firekeepers might be armed, awake, and ready to defend their prize. A theft might require stealth, deception, or outright combat, but the reward was too great to ignore. Some accounts passed down in oral traditions tell of men sprinting through the night with burning branches, smoke stinging their eyes, legs pumping with adrenaline, knowing that if they stumbled, the flame could die, or worse, they could be caught. Others tell of women and elders guarding the new fire as if it were a newborn, shielding it from wind and rain with their own bodies. It was in these daring missions that humanity's relationship with fire transformed from reliance to obsession. Fire was no longer a gift that came and went. It was something worth risking lives for, something that could turn the weakest band of humans into the most dangerous presence on the plains. In the end, every successful return meant more than just warmth. It meant roasted meat for the first time in days. It meant safety from the eyes glowing beyond the tree line. It meant the children could sleep without shivering. And above all, it meant hope, because deep down, our ancestors knew. The tribe that controlled fire controlled the future, and soon, that truth would lead them to the next great leap, learning to create it themselves. The fire thieves. Long before humans mastered the art of sparking a flame, fire was a prize you could only take, and taking it was never easy. The world tens of thousands of years ago was not generous with fire. Lightning storms might ignite trees, but the blaze could be gone in hours. Lava might spill from the earth, but it rarely flowed near human camps. Grass fires started by heat or drought could rage across the plains, but approaching them meant breathing smoke thick enough to burn your lungs and facing predators fleeing from the same inferno. That left one more option: steal it from someone else. Fire theft was not just a story, it was a strategy, a survival tactic woven into the unspoken laws of the ancient world. In many regions, if you saw smoke on the horizon, it wasn't just a sign of warm, it was a target. Tribes without fire would track the glow for days, moving under cover of darkness, watching from a distance until they spotted the keepers of the flame. The approach was an art form. Some thieves moved like shadows, slipping into enemy territory when guards nodded off or drifted away. Others staged distractions, a hunting cry in the distance to lure warriors away, a sudden stampede of animals driven toward the camp to sow chaos. In the confusion, one or two figures would slip forward, grab a burning branch, and vanish into the night. But even for the stealthiest, the danger was immense. A fire wasn't just heat, it was power. Losing it meant weakness, and no tribe gave up power willingly. Getting caught in the act could mean a spear to the chest or a chase through the dark by men who knew the land better than you ever could. Still, the rewards outweighed the risks. A single burning stick could keep embers alive for weeks if tended carefully. From it, they could build a fire pit, smoke meat, warm sleeping shelters, and keep predators at bay. That stick might mean the difference between a tribe thriving or starving before winter's end. It's no wonder ancient myths around the world echo this truth: fire was worth stealing. From the Greek legend of Prometheus defying the gods, to Polynesian tales of the demigod Maui tricking the keeper of the flame, the story repeats itself. Fire belonged to the bold. In reality, the first fire thieves were not gods or demigods. They were desperate men and women who understood one simple fact: you could survive without a hunt for days, but without fire, you wouldn't survive the night. And so they risked everything, not for glory, not for conquest, but for a flicker of light in the dark, because in their world, a flicker could mean life itself. The wind was sharp that night, carrying the scent of smoke across the plains. It was faint, almost a whisper in the air, but to the hunter crouched in the grass, it was as clear as a drumbeat. He raised his head, nostrils flaring. There it was, again, burnt wood, warm and rich, the smell of life itself. He turned to the others. 4 figures, silent as stone, their faces painted with ash to hide the glint of skin in the moonlight. No words were spoken. They had already agreed. The fire ahead was not theirs. It belonged to another tribe, and tonight, they would take it. They moved low, their bodies pressed to the earth, each step careful not to snap a twig or rustle a leaf. In the distance, beyond a small ridge, the orange glow pulsed against the night sky. It flickered and swayed, each wave of light stirring hunger and hope inside them. When they reached the ridge, they saw it clearly, 3 fires burning in a loose circle. Warriors sat around them, their spears resting against logs, the crackle of flame mixing with low murmurs. A few women tended to meat roasting over the embers, the smell thick and maddening. The thieves' stomachs growled, but hunger was a distraction they could not afford. The leader, a man with a scar carved deep across his jaw, signaled for patience. They crouched in the cold for hours, waiting for the camp to soften into the sluggishness of fatigue. The first warriors drifted into sleep, heads nodding. Those left awake stared into the flames, their bodies loosening in the heat. Then it happened. One guard rose and walked toward the edge of the camp, vanishing into the trees. The leader's hand flicked forward. It was time. 2 thieves slipped around the far side of the ridge, circling wide to approach from the shadows. The leader and his second darted low, their feet almost gliding over the earth. Every crackle of the fire masked their steps. They reached the nearest flame. The heat hit their faces like a slap. The leader plunged a bundle of dry moss and bark into the fire. It caught instantly, flames licking up greedily. He yanked it free, cradling it in a hollowed piece of bark to shield it from the wind. Behind him, his second did the same. Then a voice split the air, a shout. One of the women had seen the movement. Warriors leaped up, spears in hand. The thieves ran. The moss flared, the heat burning their palms, but they didn't let go. The chase thundered behind them, footsteps pounding, shouts growing closer. But in the darkness beyond the ridge, the rest of their party waited. Arrows hissed through the air, forcing the pursuers to fall back. The thieves didn't stop until the glow of the stolen fire lit their own camp, and the cold was pushed back once more. That night, their tribe feasted, and in every bite, in every breath of smoke, they tasted victory. Not every theft ended in triumph. Some ended in blood. In the prehistoric world, fire wasn't just survival, it was dominance. To lose it was to admit weakness, and weakness invited death. That's why a stolen flame often became more than a simple loss. It became a declaration of war. When a tribe woke to find their fire gone, there was no time for mourning. They knew the thieves wouldn't be far, and the longer they waited, the stronger the enemy's position would become. Revenge wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. The victors would not only reclaim what was taken, they would send a message to every other band within reach. Steal from us, and you won't live to enjoy it. Sometimes these retaliations came swift and brutal. Warriors would follow the faint trail of smoke left by the stolen embers, trekking through forest and plain until they reached the thieves' camp. At dawn, they would strike torches in hand, turning the attackers into the attacked. Entire camps could be burned in retaliation, wiping out months of stored food and leaving survivors to scatter into the wild. Other times, the war was slower, colder. The wronged tribe might wait for the perfect moment, when winter's grip was strongest, when the thieves had grown tired, when their sentries had grown complacent, and then, under cover of darkness, they would take not only their own flame back, but every scrap of food, every weapon, every skin of water. The defeated would wake to nothing but frost and hunger. There are bones in the archaeological record that bear silent witness to these conflicts: fractured skulls, spear wounds, broken ribs from blunt force. Some skeletons are found alongside fire pits, suggesting a sudden attack mid-meal, the flames still glowing as blood was spilled. But for every war that ended in slaughter, there were also uneasy truces. Fire could be a bargaining chip as much as a weapon. Tribes who possessed it could demand food, hides, or weapons in exchange for a share of their flame. This wasn't generosity, it was control. By giving just enough to keep others alive, they cemented their power as the firekeepers of the land. In this way, fire became one of the earliest currencies, traded, stolen, guarded, and fought over. It wasn't gold, it wasn't land, it was a living thing, carried in embers, breathing through smoke, and capable of changing the balance of power in a single night. And the more humans fought for it, the more they understood. Relying on nature's rare gifts or the mercy of others was dangerous. If they wanted to truly own fire, they would need to create it themselves. That realization would lead to the next great chapter in human history, a turning point when the Age of Fire. Thieves gave way to the Age of Firemakers. The predator's shadow, the hunt for fire, was never just about fire. It was about walking willingly into the kingdom of killers. Every journey toward a distant flame meant crossing through someone else's territory, often the territory of creatures far stronger, faster, and better equipped for killing than any human. In the Ice Age, the land did not belong to people. It belonged to predators. Wolves hunted in coordinated packs, tracking scent trails for miles. Saber-toothed cats could stalk silently through the brush, invisible until they struck. Hyenas larger and more dangerous than the ones we know today could crush bones with a single bite. And then there were the bears. Towering cave bears and short-faced bears. Both massive, both territorial, and both willing to kill anything that came too close. For early humans, these predators were not abstract fears. They were daily realities. Leaving the safety of camp after nightfall was like stepping into a battlefield where the enemy had every advantage. Humans didn't have night vision, they didn't have speed, they didn't have claws. All they had was a brain, a weapon in hand, and the hope that luck would be on their side. A mission to retrieve fire often meant moving in total silence for hours. Ears tuned to every snap of a twig. If the flame came from a lightning-struck tree in an open field, the risk was high, but manageably you could see trouble coming. But if the fire burned deep in the forest, the danger multiplied. Thick undergrowth could hide an ambush until it was too late. Predators weren't the only threat. Prey animals, startled by the smell of smoke or the movement of humans, could stampede without warning, trampling anything in their path. A single misstep could mean a twisted ankle, a broken bone, and no hope of escape. To improve their odds, some hunters would carry torches or smoldering sticks from earlier fire's light that might ward off certain animals, but could just as easily give away their position to others. Others moved in small coordinated groups, each member with a role. Scouts to watch the trees and shadows, guards to cover the rear, and carriers to focus solely on bringing the fire home alive. Still, there were times when even the best planning failed. The ground could betray them with hidden holes. The wind could shift and carry their scent straight into a predator's nose. A single roar in the dark could turn the hunt for fire into a desperate sprint for survival. This was the reality of living in a world where humans were not yet at the top of the food chain. To gain fire, you had to face the masters of the night and win. The moon was thin that night, offering little more than a silver haze over the plains. For hunters moved in silence, their eyes fixed on a faint orange glow deep within the valley. A tree had been struck by lightning earlier that evening, and the fire still burned a rare gift. But between them and that burning prize lay a stretch of forest known for one thing: the lair of the saber-toothed cat. Every tribe in the region knew the stories. A predator larger than any lion, with fangs like twin daggers curving from its jaw. It didn't roar before it struck. It didn't warn. It watched. It waited. And when it moved, it was already too late. The hunters entered the tree line in single file, every step deliberate. The smell of smoke grew stronger, but so did something else, the thick, coppery scent of meat. Somewhere ahead, the cat had fed recently. That meant it could be sleeping, or it could be nearby, guarding the kill. They paused at a clearing. The leader knelt, touching the dirt-fresh prints. Massive, round, the size of a man's spread hand. The edges were crisp. The cat was close. They had two choices: turn back and lose the fire to time, or press forward and risk not returning at all. No one spoke. They pressed forward. The glow ahead began to dance between the trunks. The burning tree was close now. But then, the forest went silent. No wind, no insects, just the sound of their own breathing. A shadow shifted to their right. One of the hunters froze, his eyes wide. Two golden orbs glinted in the dark, low to the ground, unblinking. The leader raised his spear slowly, not in attack but in warning. The others did the same, torches shaking slightly in their hands. The cat stepped forward, and its size was almost unreal. Its shoulders stood nearly level with the hunter's chest, and the moonlight caught on the curve of its fangs. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the leader thrust his torch toward the animal, sending sparks flying. The cat flinched, its ears flattening. Another hunter shouted, banging the shaft of his spear against a fallen log. The noise and light combined, and the cat backed away but only a few steps. It was not running, it was weighing its odds. The hunters knew they couldn't linger. Two rushed forward, plunging bundles of dry bark into the burning tree, the flames leaping greedily to their fuel. The leader kept his torch between the cat and his people, every nerve screaming at him not to blink. Finally, with their prize secured, they began a slow retreat, never turning their backs. Only when they reached the open plain did the cat melt back into the shadows. That night, they returned to camp not just with fire, but with a story, a reminder that every flame had its cost. And sometimes, that cost stared at you with golden eyes. The saber-toothed cat wasn't the only competitor in the hunt for fire. In the prehistoric world, flames drew life from miles around, not just humans, but every creature capable of sensing heat or smelling smoke. And not all of them came for the same reason. Some predators, like the big cats, came out of curiosity or hunger, stalking whatever prey might be gathered near the warmth. Others, like wolves or hyenas, were opportunists drawn to the chaos a fire could cause, knowing that frightened prey meant easy kills. Even scavengers, like giant vultures, would circle overhead, waiting for the moment a hunt turned bloody. For a band of fire hunters, this meant the journey could quickly turn into a contest they never expected. Imagine setting out for a lightning-struck grove only to find you not alone, fresh paw prints in the mud beside your own footprints, the smell of other hunters in the air. Not human hunters. Four-legged ones? One recorded tale in tribal oral tradition speaks of a group who reached a burning grass patch, just as a pack of dire wolves did. The wolves, massive and thick-furred, circled the flames, drawn by the scent of roasted carcasses. The humans hung back, spears in hand, watching the wolves tear into charred remains. Every time the hunters took a step forward to grab a burning branch, the wolves would lift their heads, snarling through blood-stained teeth. It became a standoff, neither side willing to yield the fire. In the end, the humans used noise and intimidation, banging their spears against shields of bark, shouting into the wind, and sending a rain of sparks into the wolves' faces. The pack finally retreated, but only far enough to stalk from the shadows. Even as the hunters carried their smoldering prize away, they could hear the padded footsteps following them through the dark. In other cases, humans didn't just compete with predators, they followed them. When a wildfire swept through a valley, large predators often fed on the bodies of animals trapped in the blaze, lingering until the heat died. Once they moved on, humans would approach, scavenging both meat and fire from the same site. It was a risky gamble. Arrived too soon, and you became the next meal. Arrived too late, and both meat and flame were gone. Every encounter like this drove home the same truth: fire was never free. It was never simply waiting to be taken. Something else always wanted it, and whatever that something was, beast or manette, would fight for it. But the more dangerous the journey became, the clearer it was to our ancestors that they needed a better way. A way to hold fire without chasing it, a way to create it on their own terms. That idea would ignite the next great leap in human evolution, the dawn of fire-making. The birth of fire-making. The night was absolute, not the night you know, peppered with street lamps, glowing windows, and the hum of distant cars, but the kind of night that swallows everything. A darkness so complete it pressed against the skin, whispering of unseen predators beyond the edge of human sight. The air was sharp, bitter with cold, and every breath condensed into pale clouds that vanished as quickly as they appeared. The clan huddled together beneath a canopy of skeletal branches, their bodies shivering, their stomachs hollow, their eyes darting to every sound. The only light was the moon, thin, wan, and useless for warmth. In this merciless blackness, survival was not about comfort. It was about not dying before dawn. And then, it happened. It began not as a roar, but as a whisper, teeny sparks leaping from stone to dried grass, a glow no larger than a fingernail. One man, calloused hands trembling, cupped the fragile ember like a newborn. He fed it slivers of bark, dry moss, scraps of brittle wood, breathing gently, coaxing it into life. And in an instant that would alter the destiny of our species, the ember breathed back. It grew, it flickered, it became fire. The others gasped, not in fear, but in awe. The flames painted the night in golden crimson, shadows leaping on the trees like spirits. The warmth seeped into frozen bones, the light pushed back the predators hiding in the dark. And for the first time in human history, night belonged to man. That moment was more than survival, it was conquest. Fire was not just heat, it was safety, it was a weapon. It was a signal to the universe: we are no longer prey. But here's the truth: modern humans forget fire-making was not a skill you had, it was a skill you earned. It required patience that outlasted hunger, precision in the dead of cold, and a mind that could see possibility where others saw only smoke. It was the line between the living and the dead. And tonight, in this chapter, we step into that night, and witness the moment mankind took its first real breath of power, mastering the flame. At first the fire was a fragile god, beautiful, dangerous, and demanding constant worship. It devoured without mercy, and if neglected, it died without pity. The clan quickly learned that fire was not a gift you could simply have. It was a living thing you had to tend, feed, and protect. The first challenge was keeping it alive through the night. They learned to stack thicker logs at the edges, feeding the center with smaller branches, building a rhythm between flame and wood. Too much fuel, and it smothered itself. Too little, and it coughed into embers, leaving them shivering in the jaws of the dark. They discovered that fire spoke in crackles and pops, its voice warning of hunger or rage. The smoke told stories about wet wood, green branches, or a fire that was dying. They soon, the fire was more than warmth, it became the heart of the camp. It roasted meat, making it safer to eat. It hardened wooden spear tips, turning fragile sticks into lethal tools. It smoked hides, preserving them for clothing. It dried roots and berries, stretching their food beyond the day's hunt. And in ways they could not yet explain, fire changed them from the inside. Cooked meat released more energy, more fuel for the brain. Around the flames, they told stories, passing on hunting lessons, warning of dangers, dreaming aloud of places beyond the mountains. Their words became sharper, their thoughts more daring, their bonds stronger. But with mastery came danger. Fire drew eyes in the night, both human and beast. A rival clan might see the glow from far away and follow it like moths, seeking to take the fire by force. Predators, too, learned that where there was flame, there was food, sometimes the charred bones of a kiln, sometimes the soft, distracted humans themselves. The fire made them powerful, but it also made them visible. To keep it meant more than skill, it meant readiness to fight. In mastering fire, the clan had done more than survive another winter, had opened a door to a new kind of existence. One where man was not just a creature of the earth, but a shaper of it. And yet, even then, they knew, a flame could build an empire, or burn it to ashes. Fire as a weapon at first, fire had been a shield, a warm circle against the cold, a trembling light to push back the night. But the day came when they realized it could also be a blade. It began by accident. A dry grass patch, too close to the hearth, caught a wandering ember. Within seconds, the wind took it, feeding it like a starving beast. The flames tore across the ground in a frenzy, devouring everything in their path. The clan scrambled, panicked, throwing dirt, stomping, shouting, but they also watched, and what they saw was terrifying and useful. When the fire died, the ground was blackened, littered with the charred remains of small animals caught in the blaze. The next day, scavengers came sniffing, and the hunters followed spears ready. The fire had cleared the brush, revealed nests, driven game into the open. It was destruction, yes, but destruction with purpose. From then on, they began to think differently. If a wall of flame could kill, could it also corner? If smoke could drive bees from their hive, could it drive enemies from hiding? They began to carry embers and hollowed stones, bundles of smoldering bark wrapped in green leaves, ready to release hell when needed. They learned to set fire along a ridge before a hunt, herding deer toward the waiting spears below. They discovered that a sudden blaze could scatter a rival clan, turning strength into chaos in moments. The fire became an extension of their will, a weapon no beast could match, but wielding it carried a cost. One misjudged wind, one spark too soon, and the inferno could turn on its masters. There were nights when the clan slept under a sky the color of blood, the land burning so fiercely that the heat blistered their skin even from a distance. The fire did not care who commanded it, it only cared about feeding, and so, the clan learned respect. They wielded it with caution, but never hesitation. It was not kindness that made them careful, it was survival. Because once you've seen what fire can do to an enemy, you never forget. And once you've seen what it can do to you, you never forgive yourself. Hunger's edge, hunger changes everything. It strips away patience, civility, even fear. It is not a whisper, it is a roar that drowns out every other thought. The winter had been long, cruel, and relentless. The snow lay deep enough to swallow a child whole. The rivers were locked in ice, so thick an axe would crack before breaking through. The trees stood skeletal and silent, their bark frozen like stone. Game had vanished weeks ago, following some ancient instinct southward. What little remained the half-starved hares. The birds picking through frozen berries was not enough to keep the clan alive. Faces had grown hollow, eyes sunken into shadow. The children no longer played. They simply lay curled together for warmth. Every breath was a visible cloud, proof they were still here barely. Then came the tracks. A line of prints pressed deep into the snow, heavy and deliberate. Musk ox, fat with the reserves that could carry a whole herd through the season, and in the mind of every hunter, a single thought pulsed. One kill could save us all. But this was no easy prey. The beast was massive, armored in hair and muscle, its horns like curved daggers. It could trample a man to pulp in seconds. Worse, the herd guarded its own, circling the weakest, forming a wall of flesh and fury. The clan gathered in the dim light before dawn. No one spoke of the danger. They didn't need to. The cold had already decided for them. If they failed, the snow would claim them. If they succeeded, they would see spring. Spears were sharpened until they could split hair. Sinew lashings were checked and tightened. Fire was carried in smoldering bundles, hidden beneath bark to shield it from the wind. Every movement was deliberate, every heartbeat measured. As they began their silent march across the frozen plain, the hunger followed them like a shadow. It pushed them forward, not with fear, but with a kind of desperate clarity. On that day, the line between hunter and hunted would vanish. Only one would walk away, the hunt without mercy. The wind tore across the plain, a knife against the skin. It carried with it the scent of the herd, musky, sharp, alive. Every hunter could smell it now. The smell of life, the smell of meat. There they were, black shapes against the white horizon, steam rising from their broad backs like smoke from a fire. A living fortress, the musk ox stood close together, horns outward, eyes glinting like obsidian under the pale sun. The weak one was there limping, trailing slightly behind the wall of defenders. A crack in the armor, a chance. The hunters fanned out in silence, each step sinking into the snow with a muffled thump. They circled wide, their furs blending into the winter world, their breath slow and controlled. Every movement had been practiced in stories, in whispers, in dreams. But dreams could not prepare them for the pounding in their chests now. A signal was given, a sharp nod. One man broke from the line, shouting, waving his arms, charging the herd. The musk ox snorted, hooves stamping, horns lowering. They bellowed as one, the sound vibrating through the frozen ground. But this was no reckless attack, it was a calculated disruption. From the flank came more hunters, driving the herd sideways, creating confusion. Snow sprayed under pounding hooves, the circle broke for a heartbeat. That was enough. The spears flew. One struck high, glancing off the thick hide. Another buried itself deep into a shoulder. The wounded musk ox stumbled, bellowing in rage and pain. Its defenders closed around it, but the hunters pressed in, relentless, cutting at the wall from every side. Then the fire came. Bundles of smoldering bark were thrown low, hissing in the snow, releasing smoke and heat into the animals' faces. The herd shied away from the unnatural threat, the circle loosening. And in that opening, 3 hunters charged. Spears drove forward, finding the chest, the neck, the soft underbelly. Blood steamed against the snow. The musk ox collapsed to its knees, legs kicking weakly. One final spear ended the struggle. Silence fell except for the rasping breaths of men and beasts. The hunters stood over their kill, hands trembling not from cold, but from the aftershock of survival. They had taken life to keep their own. There was no triumph here, only necessity. The work began immediately. Knives of stone and bones sliced through hide and muscle, releasing warmth into the freezing air. Every part would be used: meat for the belly, hide for the back, sinew for the bow. Nothing wasted, nothing forgotten. By nightfall, they would return to the camp not as heroes, but as keepers of life. For another season, the snow would not win. The firekeeper's night in the Paleolithic world was not quiet. It was a breathing, shifting darkness. Wind curled through the grasslands with a low hiss, carrying the distant cough of a leopard. Somewhere, in the ravine below, a hyena let out its mocking laugh, a sound that could hollow the stomach of any man who had ever faced it alone. But here, in the center of the camp, a single defiant light pulsed against the void. The fire, it was small by modern standards, no higher than a man's knees, yet it was everything. It was heat against the biting cold, safety against the creeping predators, and a promise of cooked meat that kept bellies from rotting. To keep it alive was not just a chore, it was a duty. The firekeepers, a handful of chosen individuals, sat cross-legged in a circle, their faces smeared with ash. They weren't warriors in the way the spear hunters were, but their responsibility was heavier than the weight of any weapon. If the fire died, the tribe would not simply suffer. They would descend back into the primal terror of the dark where predators ruled without mercy. They learned to read fire the way others read the sky. The faint lean of the flame told them when to add grass. The deep, slow crackle warned of a coal bed running thin. And the moment the wind shifted, they built a shield of stones to keep the heart from being smothered. Each ember was treated like a living heartbeat. When the tribe moved to new hunting grounds, the fire was never extinguished. It was carried. Hot coals, wrapped in bark and moss, cradled in a woven sling, strapped to the back of the swiftest runner. He would travel miles, every step careful not to stumble, because a single fall could mean a night without warmth, without light, without safety. There were whispers in the dark about what happened to those who lost the fire. Some said the spirits of the hunt would curse them. Others claimed predators were drawn to those who wandered without flame, as if the darkness itself had its own hunger. So the firekeepers did not sleep deeply. They took shifts, eyes flickering open at the faintest change in the crackle. Theirs was the quiet heroism. No glory in the kill, no songs of the hunt, but they were the invisible line between survival and extinction. And it was in this sacred duty, passed down from elder to apprentice, that humanity began to change. For the first time, survival depended not only on strength, but on discipline, foresight, and trust. It was more than a skill, it was a covenant. The fire was not theirs to own, they were only its guardians. And as long as it burned, so too would the story of humankind. The next morning, as the sun rose like a giant fire on the horizon, I stood at the edge of the valley. In front of me was the path leading back to where we had set up camp. Behind me was the sound of the wind swirling around the cliffs, mixed with the laughter and calls of those who had accompanied me through this harsh winter. I know that even if time brings me back to the modern world, the memories of those nights keeping watch over the fire, of those footsteps stalking the shadows of prey in the snow, will always burn in my heart, where the bond, courage and light of fire have connected us with people tens of thousands of years ago. Perhaps, risking our lives for fire is not just a fight for survival, but a reminder that in the dark and cold, people always find each other, to share warmth, to protect, to survive. If this story gives you a clearer picture of the mysteries of prehistoric times, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Each week, we will continue our journey back in time, exploring the wild world and untold stories. And do you forget to share this video so that more people can feel the journey our ancestors went through. Who knows, one day, you too will find yourself standing in front of a fire, facing the darkness, and understanding that that light is the legacy that humanity risked its lives to preserve.